We are excited to have you join us in this third webinar. We've had a series of webinars, and they're all available on our website, OCCRL.illinois.edu. This third one will take a focus on CTE and assessment of student learning. The first two, we had Dr. Burrs, who I think is on the call with us today, talk about the promise and the perils of program review. And I invite you to go back and look at that if you're interested. And she really set us up for the next one, where we had tips and tricks from many of our program review. It's a committee, advisory committee, who shared what they do at their institutions around program review, and I think very helpful. Many were talking about it in terms of student support, others in terms of maybe cross-disciplinary instruction or even academic disciplines. Many of the pieces that you look for in your program review. And in this one, we wanted to focus in directly on CTE, and we had a wide variety of interest. So definitely a lot of people registered for this particular webinar to hear, hopefully, some pieces I think that may be missing in your assessment process that could be helpful, that both Dr. Ivory and Kathy Taylor are going to provide to you all today. And so with that, I'd like to get just a short introduction from our panelists today to let you know about who they are and where they are and how long they've been involved with program review. So we'll start with Kathy, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Dr. Baker. My name is Kathy Taylor. I am the Dean of the Sustainability Business and Career Technologies Division at Elgin Community College. That's a long title for the division, but we have most of the CTE programs in our division, everything except healthcare and a couple of other areas. But our division has 19 different programs, all of which are CTE programs. And we work very diligently to ensure that we are taking active roles in program review. I believe we have 4 programs that are up for review in this next fiscal year. And so as a result of that, we work very closely with our manager of outcomes assessment, who actually happens to be on this call today. Hi, Lisa. Hi. And so we work very closely with Lisa, and Lisa's been a valuable resource for us in terms of helping us to organize and structure our program review. And then myself and our associate deans work closely with our faculty to ensure that we get our program reviews done in such a way that it really does serve as a business plan going forward for the next 5 years.
Dr. Ivory.
Good morning, everyone. Joanne Ivory. I'm the Dean for Career and Technical Programs at Harper College. We have approximately, in my division, soon to be 27 departments and the bazillion programs. Yeah, it has grown by leaps and bounds. So we work very, very closely with our assessment office. We have an office out of our institutional effectiveness that focus specifically on program and course assessments. I'm working with other academic deans. There are a total of 5 academic deans on campus that we work through and work with faculty to make sure that assessments are done, because it is critical to program review and also to the development of new programs. So Dr. Taylor mentioned she has 5 program reviews coming this year. I feel your pain. I had 8 last semester. I almost passed out. So it's a lot, but it is a necessary part of what we do. And I look forward to hearing from the committee, from everybody, from all of the attendees today, because we can share our parts, and I'm always open and interested in learning what other schools are doing and how we can improve our processes and procedures. So I want to take this opportunity to also thank Dr. Baker for inviting us to be a part of this discussion, and I'm excited to hear from everyone.
Well, it was easy, both of you, and I think you all that have joined were in for a treat today. There is nothing I think you can ask to stump either of them because they will have an answer. So you can try, but good luck.
Expectations are
Today,
high.
what we're gonna do today is have a little bit of a panel discussion. I'm gonna ask them some questions that I think most of you would have around program review regarding CTE and assessment. And then we'll break off into some breakout rooms where each of them will go and you can then go and ask, more specific questions or maybe follow up with something that they've said. And so definitely feel free to take notes and think about, what your questions might be. And then we'll come back and just regroup before we end our time today. So a lot to do in this short hour, but I hope you'll find it very useful spending your Tuesday morning here. And I'll ask, because there's many of you that are here, why don't you let us know your institution and your role in program review? It'd be helpful to hear what you all are doing in regards to program review so that we are tailoring the information to help you the most. As we get started in just asking some of the questions, we did send out a survey a couple weeks ago to those that were registered to ask them, what is it that you most want to hear while you're with us today? And we definitely got a lot of responses back at about 18, right? I was like, no one's going to reply. 18 of you did, and helped us think about, who are you, right? We have tenured faculty that are on the call. We have staff members that responded. Um, some of you are full-time, some of you are part-time in assessment. That does differ, right, in terms of how much and what your responsibilities might be, especially if you're the person that's responsible for coordinating or implementing student learning outcomes assessment in regards to CTE at your institution. Most of the respondents acknowledged that there was collaboration between CTE and their academic divisions during assessment conversations, which was, it's great. It's great. I think we had asked this question 10 years ago, the answer would have been no. So there's definitely been some intentional work happening at many of your institutions. And again, some of that was what you'll hear today. For those that responded no, that there wasn't academic conversations happening around assessment between both CTE and academic divisions, we got the answers of the plan is they will eventually, but we currently do not have productive assessment conversations, or it hasn't been built into our assessment cycle or best practices, or even competing priorities on assessment. There's inconsistent data collection. And so I think that you might find that at your own institution, right? There's always a process to be improved. And I hope that right today helps you get a little bit further along in that process. There's some areas that others addressed about what they'd like to hear from the panelists. And I'm hoping that some of the questions will spark some answers to some of those questions. But if there's others that you might find, like, as they're talking, feel free to use chat. And again, you'll have a breakout room session so that you can talk to them a little bit more. So save your question particularly for that, if you'd like to ask it. And so if I bounce back to both Dr. Irving and Kathy, I want to ask this first question because I am sure there's someone on the call that is like, start from the beginning. You know what? I don't even know, where to go, what to do. I may be first day in this role. I'd like to know, what's the first step in your program review process in relation to CTE? Who wants to start?
Dr. Ivory?
I'm sorry, my screen froze.
You want me? I can jump in.
Yes,
Okay.
go
So
ahead.
the first step in our process, and you heard me earlier acknowledge our manager of outcomes assessment, who is really the initiator, if you will, of our program review. She's already notified our division how many of our programs are up for program review in FY26. And so part of the next steps that will happen is that Lisa Wiley will start to collect the data that we need to inform our program review. She actually does hold sessions on campus with our faculty and the administrators, the deans, to go over many of the steps that we're going to encounter in terms of completing the program review process. But what I really love about what Lisa has done over the past several years, which is she has chunked it out, because if you look at program review holistically, it's overwhelming. And even after she chunks it out, it's still overwhelming. So she will chunk it out in pieces and then set deadlines or milestones for our faculty. And this is to keep them on track so that we don't get to May and no one has done section 1. And I'm saying that facetiously because it does happen. So part of what we're trying to do is to make it manageable for our faculty. The other step that I would say that we implement here at ECC is to ensure that our associate deans in our division are having frequent touch points with faculty to ensure that they are on task. So let me just back up for a second and say that our instructional coordinators are primarily responsible for completing the program review process, and this is contractual. However, one of the things that we often like to emphasize to our instructional coordinators is don't do this in a vacuum. Don't do this by yourself. If you have 3 other faculty members in your department, please ask them to assist you in developing responses to these questions. And oftentimes we find that some are better at this than others. And if you have a situation where there's one full-time instructor in the department and the rest are adjuncts, the chances of really getting adjunct involvement could be touch and go. And so those are just the realities of what's happening here at ECC. And I think, those are the steps that we try to follow. The last step that I will talk about is what Lisa and her team will do is basically they'll go over all of the responses that we've made. They will give us feedback. They will also make suggestions on how we can reframe our responses. And then there's also a data person from our IR department who also helps us in terms of being able to not so much analyze the data, but to interpret the data. And I know there's going to be a data question later on in this discussion, and that one is another opening, if you will, for how that gets interpreted by faculty and how it's interpreted by administrators. There's a difference.
That is so true. That is so true, Dr. Taylor. I will tell you, and I apologize. I don't know what's going on with my laptop if I freeze here. But we do a similar process. However, we have what we call the PAW, the Program Analysis Worksheet, that each year we sit down with faculty and go through and take a look at the programs. We're looking at the viability of the program, enrollment, all of those things, revenue, how much it costs per student, because all this information is going to be factored into the program, into that actual program assessment. And we have a department from our institutional effectiveness. There's a person who directly focuses on program assessment. And they are doing, even to the course level, we look at courses also for assessment, so that as we drill down into this process, we are getting actual data. Similar to Dr. Taylor, many of our departments have one, maybe 2 full-time faculty. Most of them are adjuncts. So adjuncts don't typically get involved in the program assessment. Now, it's not because they are limited or prohibited. It's simply due to work constraints. They are invited to participate. Some of them do, some of them don't. However, the full-time faculty obviously is the person who is, for lack of a better word, who's driving that train, who's driving that boat, if you will. So we, as we walk through these processes and sitting down with one of the things that helped us, because we weren't getting the responses for assessment as we normally should have. So, and at that time I was serving on one of the faculty development, I was serving on a committee, and the assessment director of assessment was there and complaining, well, faculty weren't responding, they weren't getting the information. So I said, here's what you do, send the information to the deans. Send it to the academic deans, and then we send it out to faculty. Did it add an extra thing for us to do? Yes. Did our responses increase? Absolutely. Because while they were sending it out before, they might copy me on an email. Well, it's not at the top of my list. I get copied on a ton of things, just like you all do. So if you're copying me on something, that pretty much means I don't have anything to do with that. That's an FYI for me. Not if it's something directed to us, then we're taking directed actions. So that has been tremendously helpful in getting faculty engaged in the process. We also, unlike Dr. Taylor, I don't have a ton of associate deans. I just got one, so we just got one who's actually started a week ago. So I'm really, really excited about that. We do have an associate provost who works with us for program review and assessments. And sitting with faculty, having those conversations in advance, because one of the things I learned from faculty shortly after I arrived at Harper was that a lot of faculty weren't necessarily familiar with, and they didn't think people were really looking at the program assessment. And so I started asking all these questions about why are we running, why is this class being offered, why is this program here if the enrollment is stagnant. So when I started asking questions, and I always tell them data drives decisions, and if the numbers weren't there, then they went on my list. So when they realized they were on a list to possibly have those programs sunsetted, then that changed the dynamics right away. So it's, that level of engagement changed right away. And that kind of helped me to move everything forward, to move that needle forward to get us to where we needed to be.
That's a great, I think, segue into the next question. And Dr. Taylor, you talked a little bit about this, so let me ask it directly. What are some nuances that CTE admins face, maybe generally and in their respective regions? What are some of those anomalies or nuances in CTE and program review that you might want to discuss a little bit further?
Yeah, so I would say that for any CTE dean who is on this call, you recognize, I think, first and foremost, that the programs that we oversee and the programs that we provide, there is an essential critical element that they must be relevant to labor market demand in your area. And with that said, before this call started, I was joking with Dr. Ivory and Dr. Baker, and I said, if you've got a program that where the learning outcomes haven't changed in 10 years, there's a very good possibility your program is outdated because technology has changed the industry within the last, let's just say, 2 years, 6 months. So if we're not keeping pace with what industry demands, then our programs are not relevant and we can't serve, our community. So with that being said, I oftentimes look at program review, as I said earlier, as a business plan. Because I have more years in private industry than I do in higher ed. And so I look at it as a business plan. And when you consider it as a business plan, if you're looking at it every 5 years, there's a good possibility that something has happened within those past 5 years that has changed your program, or at least caused the need for your program to change and adjust. And so I've often advocated for the fact that perhaps after we've completed the program review, maybe we go back and look at it a year later to see if we're still on target, especially with the goals that we're trying to achieve. And for CTE programs, that might mean you have to look at your program review every 6 months. I mean, you really do have to treat it like a business plan. It can't be something that we do and just sit on the shelf and we dust it off after 5 years and then come back and look at it again. So I've been a very strong advocate for that. Now, to the extent that we do that here at ECC, it's not necessarily happening, but I will tell you that, in terms of curriculum, we find ourselves within that 5 year period going to curriculum committee to say, okay, we need to introduce a new class, a new course, or we need a new piece of equipment. So we're going to the vice president and asking for money to purchase a new equipment. And what tends to happen is we have to find some way to pull that back and align it with the goals that were in our program review. So imagine that section on goals that you're doing in your program review. You almost have to have a crystal ball, right? to determine what you're going to need over the course of the next 5 years. And so, fortunately for us, we've been able to tie it back to program review. And I think we've written our goals in such a way that leaves us space and flexibility to be able to align new equipment and new programs and new outcomes, or at least update the learning outcomes so that we are, again, as I said earlier, relevant to industry need. And this is happening at a very fast pace. So in my division, I oversee all of our manufacturing programs. And if anyone on this call has a manufacturing program, you know that that has changed since the pandemic. Everything accelerated during the pandemic. And now we're looking at AI, Internet of Things, cybersecurity. All of that is a part of manufacturing now. And so I know Dr. Simpson is on this call. He's one of our associate deans. We have talked a lot in our division about how do we pull in our CIS department into our manufacturing programs, because there's going to be a need there. And so now there's this interdisciplinary connection that could occur. So I know, Dr. Baker, I've kind of gone all over the place with the response to this question, because this is something that I'm very passionate about. I'm very passionate about it because, again, I want to make sure that our programs are relevant to our local community. And if they're not, then that means our employers are going somewhere else to get the education and training they need.
I've seen some head nods from people in the crowd. So you are hitting on exactly what I think, right? CTE is the heart of a community college. And so
Yeah.
the passion that you have for this is coming out, and it's appreciated. Joanne, go ahead.
Yeah, so just tagging on to Dr. Taylor's comment, it is critical. It is a critical need. And one of the things that I realized that after program review, that goal sheet, it was just put up with everything else. And then when you came back 5 years later, nobody. And so my question was, okay, you set this goal. Where are you in it? When we're doing our annual review, what is the progress? And people looking at me like, what? Oh, I didn't know I had to actually do this thing. It was a goal. It's like, yeah, but you need to achieve it. You just put it out there. So I think that level of accountability is critical. The other anomaly is one of the things I noticed is the difference in labor market data from the state level, because the state says that they have, and I'm just making 200,000 jobs in transportation or manufacturing, which may very well be true. But how many of those jobs are in your area? That's the disconnect. We need to be looking at where we are. What does that data mean for our respective area? Because just looking at it from a state perspective doesn't work. So one of the things we did, we purchased what it used to be Burning Glass, now it's Lightcast. We purchased labor market data so we could get real time drill down to the 6 counties to see where these jobs are. Are people making living wages? Because that's an anomaly. People are looking at, well, this is what the national data is, but it doesn't work. Where is it in your respective area? So look at those numbers. The other thing I realized we were missing is the gap, the distance between CE programs and continuing education programs and CTE programs, because a lot of students start out taking a CE class. They might have taken an AI class and said they liked it, or their job changed. Now you need to get some credentials. So how many of those students are transitioning, and are your programs aligned so that they can smoothly transition from one to the other?
Oops, she
You
froze
froze.
again.
A degree for AI in January. And ICCB just approved, which was the longest I've ever known it to take to get an approval, but that's a whole nother story. However, in the time it took us to get the Form 20 and everything done and approved, we've had to now go back and make changes because the software and things that we were using is now outdated. That's how fast it's moving. So when you're looking at your program review and doing assessments, you've got to have that industry impact. You've got to have direct input from the industry, because they're the people that are going to be hiring them. If they're not on your curriculum, your advisory committee providing input into the curriculum, you're going to have a problem, because then you're training people for a job that they're not going to get, because now they are because the information because your courses are no longer relevant. You've got to look at them continuously. One of the things I've challenged faculty with, excuse me, is looking at what does your industry say? Where's the need? And then tapping into it and looking at the curriculum to Dr. Taylor's point. Some curriculum hadn't been changed in 10 years. So we had to go back and look at it and make those changes. Because if we aren't providing students with what they need, guess what? They're going someplace else. They have choices. This is not 10, 20 years ago. We are not the only game in town. So we have to make sure that we are relevant and that we are addressing and responsive to the needs of not only the students, but also of industry.
Can I add one other thing,
Yes.
Dr. Baker? Something that Dr. Ivory touched on, which is the AI and advisory committees. I want to just talk about AI for a minute because regardless of how our faculty feel about AI, and I know, and even some administrators, I know there are a lot of people who are either on the fence or one side or the other side. My point is this: AI is now an expectation in the workforce. So your students coming out of these programs, regardless of what program it is, there's an expectation on the part of employers that they have some knowledge and skills of being able to facilitate or manage AI because they're going to need it on their job. The second thing is on advisory committees. I know for our college, the faculty pretty much lead, if you will, advisory committees. But what I would like to also say is that we've tried to work very closely with our faculty to ensure that they are asking the right questions. But even when you're asking the right questions, you have to have the right people in the room who can respond to those questions. So if you've got an advisory committee that you've had for the last 20 years and no one on that committee has changed in 20 years, you're going to get what you get, right? And again, I'm being very passionate about this, but I'm also being very candid because you cannot inform your program with people who are telling you things that they wanted to have 20 years ago. It just doesn't work. So that means you have to have new people involved in your advisory committee meetings. One of the things that Dr. Simpson and I just talked about yesterday that we are going to discuss at our opening day is getting our manufacturing faculty to invite AI experts, computer experts into their advisory committee meetings. Because while our industry may not necessarily be doing it today, trust me when I tell you, a year from now, tomorrow, 6 months from now, they will be doing it. And they need to understand how now all of this technology is infiltrating and driving their competitive edge, not only on a local scale, not on a state scale, not a national, but a global scale. We have to be real about that.
Dr. Baker, can I just tag one quick
Please.
15 seconds onto that?
Please.
You are absolutely right, Dr. Taylor. AI is not going anyplace. I love it. I boldly make that statement in faculty. Some of them hate it. Well, it's not going away. It is not going away. We've got to embrace it. The other thing we have to do is to ensure on our advisory committees that we're including our high school faculty in that process. Yes. Because I tell faculty all the time when they give you, well, this is the way I was in the industry for 20 years. I was in the industry for 30 years. I said, you know what? That's fantastic. You have a wealth of knowledge, but understand this. The children in these high school students are coming, they weren't born 20 years ago. They have no idea. So they don't know that world. They know this world. And if we're not prepared to help them to get to the next step in this world, it is going to be a challenge. And for anyone who's had people on the advisory committee for 20 years, I got a real nice letter that I sent out to people because we do a 2-year rotation, to thank them for their services. And then here's some other ways that you can serve the college.
Can I get a copy of that letter, please?
I was going to say, you might have people reach out.
No, you can serve in other capacities, but we were thank you.
I need a copy of that letter, Dr. Ivory.
Oh,
I'll send it to you.
So we're going to take the next 15 minutes to jump into breakout rooms. Again, you can talk with either Dr. Taylor or Dr. Ivory. A couple questions that we didn't necessarily get to in this larger group that you might want to talk through are, what's distinct about your process? We know that there's not just one right way to do program review, right? But what is it that they've locked in on? And potentially a little bit further conversation on assessment of student learning within CTE. You talked a little bit about that, and we talked a little bit about labor market data, but perhaps you want to ask a little bit more about what assessment looks like on their campus, who's involved in the conversations and how it's worked on their campuses, because I feel like both have been pretty successful in that space. And we'll come back about 9:45 and regroup before we end. So with that, I'll open up the rooms. Please do join one of them. You'll learn from both. And if you want to switch in and out of rooms, feel free.
So, Dr. Baker, I'm not quite sure what we really need to address later to get to the conclusion of this, but we had just started a really good conversation about the interpretation of data on the part of faculty and administrators. And if I can just
Please.
pick on my friend here, John Oliver, to share what he does with data, I think it might be a conversation opener for the rest of the group, if you don't mind.
I would love to. Please, Mr. Oliver.
Thanks there, Dr. Baker. Gianina and I used to work together quite closely. So, no, we were just chatting and you know, we're trying to here at Richland to get faculty to own their programs more. So we really, now we've got several new deans over the last few years and really putting a lot of that work on the faculty. But you know, obviously timing, with summer break and everything coming up. So that's also makes it a struggle. But typically, you know, especially the way I've handled it the last few years, is I will gather the data. I will do a lot of the labor market information. You know, there's several sections. You know, disaggregated data. I mean, I'll input, I'll research, do a lot of that. I'll add my 2 cents in some of the areas where it seems appropriate, especially things that I've seen or heard. But you know, they're really tied to the program and the curriculum. So then we ask for their or I ask them, you know, I'll even go through and make red comments and say, all right, your input's needed here. Where do you see here? What, you know, what are our goals going forward? What are the changes? And then I literally hand it to them and give them a deadline and say, here's when I need it so that I can get it back to our expert here on campus that does a lot of the heavy lifting with all of ICCB and reporting. So that's kind of how we've been trying to move forward and handle that. You know, I think Dr. Taylor, I think we've talked, I can't remember if it was you or Dr. Ivory, we talked somewhere about even kind of our annual program viability process where we look at all of our programs. And I know somebody really uses program review as that. We've kind of got a separate process, but we're also starting to discuss where maybe if someone just did program review, then use that as the viability so they're not doing that extra work. Because, you know, sometimes faculty are like, well, I just kind of talked about all that in program viability. Now you're asking me to do a report. So we're having some more conversations, you know, always continuously improving, trying to.
Yeah. Yeah, I just really wanted John to share that only because the interpretation of the data, the student data, success rates, enrollment trends, you know, all of this helps to inform the viability of your program and even your program review. So I know for many people who are on this call, you know, we as administrators, we can interpret the data one way, but the faculty will interpret it. And they have a vested interest in how they perceive the data. They really do. Because if the data is telling them that their program is gone stagnant, to Dr. Ivory's point earlier, they're not likely to say that or write that in the program review. But what I would challenge them to do is, okay, if the data is showing your program is going stagnant, what can you do to improve it? Because if you're going to sit with the status quo, then yeah, the viability of this program is not going to last much longer.
Well, and Dr. Taylor, and there's another side that I always try to encourage them that also if they, you know, providing some of that qualitative information can be beneficial to their program because we don't always, as administrators, know what is going on at that level. That, you know, let's say welding had a, you know, 40% completion rate. Well, but you know, the instructor knows that, you know, 10 of those students got picked off by a local employer before they had a chance to complete a degree. So I've actually asked them to start keeping almost their class list each semester and like an Excel document and says, all right, that they know little Timmy. Well, I don't know what happened to little Timmy. Little Johnny went to Caterpillar. You know, there's, you know, obviously, and Janina knows here, data is only as good as the data that's been inputted. So if even if they've been coached and advised, even students might get coded incorrectly. And so there's some where this student never was a welding student, but they were put in welding or so there's some of that stuff too. But yeah, so I always tell the faculty that it's great to keep track of that for that qualitative part as well that I wouldn't even know.
Yep.
John has grown over the years. I love to hear it, John. I love it. And his Murray State racers are
Can I just
pretty
add
good,
real
so-
quick, Dr. Baker, during our session, we were also talking about data, and Liliana was going to share what they had done at their school, how they broke the data down, created it so that to help faculty to better understand it. So, when it's easier to look at data for your respective area than it is when you're looking at it from an institutional perspective, because you have to try, cut, and sort that to make it make sense for faculty in order for them to work with that. And I think she said your school used Canva. Is that correct, Liana?
Yes, Canvas. The co-chair, faculty member, department chair, put modules every month with homework. He chunked out all the questions, not by numerical order, I was saying, but just by theme, and first the low-hanging fruit, and then the time for data at later, like in October, November, to give them more time to think through those, kind of the review process first. So yes, and he has a really nice schedule from September through May of the questions that need to be answered every month. Really nice in Canvas, very accessible there. And he does videos too, which faculty like.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
That's awesome. And it sounds easily accessible. And I think one thing that we've heard from when we did the survey was that some were saying the faculty just felt overburdened by all of the tasks that are associated with program review. And it sounds like you've put it in a way that hopefully alleviates some of that and allows them to really get at, interpreting the data, making improvements, which is what you want, right? You don't want the work to be heavy in the process part of it. You want them to really spend that time interpreting and really trying to make improvements for students. And so if you take some of that out, which it sounds like you all are doing, hopefully you'll be able to see those improvements. I think we have a little bit of time left, and this is not supposed to be a plug, but we have two, I think, really good people here who sit on the CTE Dean's Commission. And I wanted to give them a chance just to talk about what that is. If you're not a part of it already, I think that you might find it valuable, and wanted to allow both Drs. Taylor and Ivory to talk about what it is and what they talk about in those meetings, and maybe have you join. Would one of you want to discuss?
Sure. Go ahead, Dr. Ivory.
Sure. The CTE Dean's Commission is comprised of academic deans from across the state, where we come together quarterly to discuss specific issues and concerns that are specific to CTE programs, providing resources to be that landing place, if you will, for questions and concerns, to work through challenges and issues, and to share best practices. It is not a B&M session, so you can fill out what B&M means as as someone once told me. So it helps us to provide responses to questions, so challenges that you're facing. We found that there are a lot of new CTE deans, and you don't have a resource. So we are here to be that resource for you, to help you to get answers to those questions that you have. Because for those of us who've been here for 3, 5, 10 years or longer, we've pretty much been through it. And if we've not experienced it, we know someone who can. And this is a resource group for CTE deans to work with us. If you are not part of the commission, it is free to join. We have quarterly meetings. Currently, Dana King is our president. So if you would like to be a part of the CTE deans, please reach out to me or Kathy, and we will make sure to get you connected.
Yeah, I think the next quarterly meeting is July 9th. But yes, send me an email and I'll make sure that you get on the invite list. And I just want to add to what Dr. Ivory said. This CTE Dean's Commission actually started at the ICCCA, what was it, 2 years ago, I believe it was.
Mhm.
And we were all in the room and we were all talking about the very same things. And many of us in the room were brand new to their role. And then there were others who had been in the role for quite a long time. And so it really is a support group. It is a networking group. And, regardless of where you are in the state of Illinois, CTE deans have some of the same nuances that they're trying to address at their individual community colleges, regardless of, like I said, where you are in the state of Illinois. There are some other different things that may influence some of your decisions. But I think John is also a part of the CTE Dean's Commission. And I don't think there's anyone else here that I recognize. But again, yes, it is really a fascinating group. We have met at an annual event now 2 years in a row. And the outcome, in terms of outcome, in terms of people who have been involved, has been phenomenal. The first year we were at Harper. This past year we were just at ICC.
ICC.
Yep, ICC down in Peoria.
Well, in the remaining time, love to hear from both of you about what you see next from this group in terms of what were some needs that maybe you heard in the breakout rooms, and even those of you on the call, maybe share in chat, or if you want to raise your hand real quick and say what else is needed, what else in this conversation on CTE and assessment of student learning do you need? This was a great first start, but what's next?
For me, I think just helping people to working through the assessment process, because while there may be new faculty, this might be new to the dean to that specific dean as well, and you're inheriting a process that, if you may or may not know needs work. So just having a space for people to address and work through those concerns, to say what is actually required in an assessment, and what is my role, and how do I get a good finished product, and when do I need to start on asking those questions and seeking having a place to go to get input and guidance.
And I would just add, especially as it relates to assessment, since that's such a critical part of program review, is remove the mindset that this is all about compliance, and really make it more about what is the value of assessment to this program. Because again, if we're not able to assess the learning outcomes, if we're not able to assess how students are matriculating through our courses and through our programs, then we're selling ourselves short. So let's remove the compliance piece of that. I think that's something that we've tried very hard to do here at ECC, is take away that whole thing and just make it really about more of a value proposition for faculty about how to ensure the success of their program.
The conversation that we had before everyone hopped on gets to that, right? What could you use program review to talk and help others at your institution understand what your needs are?
Exactly.
If you get away from that compliance piece, right, and move towards commitment, right, that absolutely can come through. And you both, I think, have some programs that absolutely have shown that. And so I thank you all for joining us this morning. I hope that you took at least a little nugget. We'll take a little nugget with you, and perhaps join us at the next webinar that we offer. But in the meantime, we hope that you have a great day, and we'll be following up with a survey just to hear about, what was helpful to you. But thank you all for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. Thank you both to Dr. Ivory and Dr. Taylor as well.
Bye.
Thank you all, everyone. Bye-bye.